Welcome to Accelerate Your Pdsa Work with Eric Budd. He is one of our contractors with one of our two grants, which is the Quality of Life grant. And while this session does not come with CEs, Eric and I were just discussing that we're going to make that happen for the next one. And of course, his live sessions, which are part of our conferences, will be coming with CEs. And we welcome all of you to this presentation, and I'm just going to turn it over to Eric.
Good morning. Thanks, Renee. Thanks for being here, everyone. Appreciate your participation today. If you get a chance, if you haven't done so already, please put your name and your facility into the chat. This session is intended to help you accelerate your Pdsa work, no matter what kind of work you're doing, whether it's on a team or individually. The things that we want to cover today will help hopefully improve some of your capabilities in making your Pdsa work more effective. However, we're going to begin with a short pre-session quiz. I've been asked to use a few pre and post-session questions and to ask you those and compare what we get on those answers. Your individual answers won't be shared with everybody else. It's just a way of comparing our totals. I'm going to launch the quiz. It may be called a poll in Zoom, and I'll go through each of the questions with you together. So please be sure to respond to all of the questions. There's not that many. I'm going to launch the poll. It should say before Pdsa. If you're not seeing that, let me know. So here's the format that we're going to be following in this. There's two answers to the pre-session quiz. The first answer you could provide is say yes if you could explain right now the answer to the question if I called upon you. I'm not going to call upon you, but if I did call upon you, you could provide an explanation to all of us for what that answer is. The other option, of course, is if you could not explain it, if called upon, just say no. So I'm going to ask, are there any questions before we dive in to at least this portion of the poll? And does everybody see it? I guess that's another question. I guess we're good to go. So question number one, I can explain the relationship between change and improvement. So that's question number one. Answer yes or no, oops, sorry, on the poll. I can explain the relationship between change and improvement. Question number two is, I can explain the primary purpose of the Pdsa Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. So yes or no, I can explain the primary purpose of the Pdsa cycle. Question number three, I can list the three elements of a successful plan phase. So has everybody seen this? And well, you have to submit your answers before I can see whether or not you're answering this. So never mind. I'll continue this. If you have questions as I go along, please, again, just to speak up. Number three is I can list the three elements of a successful plan phase. Number four is there are two things that happen in a successful do phase. I can describe them both. There are two things that happen in a successful do phase in the Plan, Do, Study, Act cycle. I can describe them both. I can state in number five, I can state the key question that should be asked and answered in study. So number five is I can state the key question that should be asked and answered in study. Number six, there are three choices, adopt, adapt, or abandon, to make during the act phase. I can explain what is the same about each of these choices. What is the same about adopt, adapt, and abandon when we make one of those choices during the act phase? Now, number 7 is fuzzy words make it difficult to evaluate the results of a Pdsa cycle. I can name at least 3 that should not be used. Number 7, fuzzy words make it difficult to evaluate the results of a Pdsa cycle. I can name at least 3 that should not be used. And 8, I can explain how using Pdsa cycles improves motivation and reduces stress. Again, number 8 is I can explain how using Pdsa cycles improves motivation and reduces stress. Number 9, we only have one more to go after this. I can explain 2 changes that demonstrate knowledge for improvement has been gained. Number 9, I can explain 2 changes that demonstrate knowledge for improvement has been gained. And then finally, when we use the 3 questions from the model for improvement, I can explain which question is the source for Pdsa tests. So those 3 questions are listed on the left side. What are we trying to accomplish? How will we know that it changes improvement? And what moves can we test that will result in improvement? All right. Has everybody entered their questions? I mean, their answers? I see 7 people have responded. 8 people have responded. Do we have any more before I end the poll? Excuse me.
Eric, somebody's saying their submit button isn't working, so it must be just, at least it doesn't seem like it indicates, because when I clicked mine, it doesn't like respond or tell me something that's happened, I guess.
Okay.
Maybe it's
But
still working.
have you selected, I haven't ended the poll yet, so I'm not sure what you get when I say I end the poll.
Oh,
But
okay.
have you selected all of your responses?
You have to answer all the questions to submit, Jane's.
Yes. Yep. Everybody has to, you have to submit all 10. You have to submit answers to all
Oh,
10.
okay. Oh, got it. Oh, I'm only looking at question 1. That explains it. Okay. So that explains it for everybody.
Yes. Yeah. So click all your responses to all of them before you submit. So it says 8 of 16 have participated. So we're missing 8 people from the session.
Eric, Doug, Jill, and I got here late, so you're not going to see ours because we don't have the poll.
You it should have been published to you. It didn't show up though, huh? Maybe that's a feature that
If you join late, it doesn't show up.
okay. Well, then for your purposes for answering questions at the end, just record your own notes about how you answered those, because you'll be comparing your answers, your own answers. So I have 9 of 16 participating. I'm going to call a conclusion to this right now, and we'll take the responses that we have. So I've just ended the poll. So let's go through this. Now, take notes. There will be another quiz. I do have a handout that I'm going to share. This is handouts for our session. It's a PDF file. And it looks like it should have shown up. Can people see that in the chat?
Yes, it's here.
Yes,
Okay, good.
yes. Mhm.
All right, so this you can use as also reference for future use, as well as what we're going to be doing towards the end of our session. So let's talk about this. I'd like to have some participation on our interaction here. So the first question we asked was, I can explain the relationship between change and improvement. So why should we even care about the relationship between change and improvement? What do we care about that?
Well, one, we can make a change and actually in an attempt to make an improvement and actually make things worse instead of better.
That's right. So what does that say when we talk about change management as a thing that we should be paying attention to? Maybe we should be calling it something different, right? Because if we could make something worse with a change, that's not an improvement. We want to do improvement management. So here's the relationship between the two. All improvement requires change, but not all change, as you just said, produces improvement. So change can just as easily move me farther away from my goals as closer to them, and improvement always moves me closer to my goals. Any other thoughts or comments on this? Have you participated in efforts that produce change but not improvement?
Yes, absolutely. And certainly one of the things which we'll probably discuss is, making multiple changes at once, then you sometimes can't determine which one was actually responsible for maybe something getting better and which one was responsible for something, not moving you closer to the goal. So
yeah, unless we're using a sophisticated tool called design of experiment, making multiple changes at the same time does confound our results. It makes it difficult to know which change is has the most effect on the outcomes that we're seeing.
And sometimes when you make changes, it can improve it for some people, but not improve it for other people.
Exactly. And that's why we want to test first small and then expand before we start just wholesale implementation, because we have that happen frequently. Sometimes something's better for one part or one group or one person even, and not for others. That's a good comment. Thanks, Jane. All right. Question 2, we said, I can explain the primary purpose of the Pdsa cycle. What did you think? If you answered yes to this, what was your thought about what the primary purpose is?
well, if nobody else is going to chime in, I mean, I see it as a tool, as a plan to essentially how we're gonna make a change. So
Yeah,
it's our template.
Yeah, so we're making a change, but we're making a change for a purpose. And what's the purpose? So there's another way of describing the Pdsa cycle. It's also known as the learn then improve cycle. So what we're looking at is the primary purpose of Pdsa is to learn. And that leaves us with another question within this, is why must learning precede improvement?
We have to gather all the information to be able to determine what the actual issue is, what the root cause of the problem.
Yeah, so there's some learning that's required to find out what's the source of the issues we're running into. So yes, there's learning there that's definitely needed. And if we don't understand or know, or we haven't learned what is the root cause of the issues we're dealing with, we're certainly going to have a challenging time trying to make improvement occur. So if we already knew what was required to produce improvement, what does that tell us about ourselves or our facility or our department? If no learning was required, why are we even attempting to run PDSA cycles? Meaning, what we're looking for is something that we don't know how to do or how to address or how to interact with. And thus, learning is the real key to what we're trying to design into our PDSA cycles. So the primary purpose of the PDSA cycle is to learn so that we can make improvement. Now, question 3, this one might be a bit more challenging for a lot of people. I can list the 3 elements of a successful plan phase. So when we're thinking about PDSA, we're trying to set up a foundation so that we can learn. So what is it that we need to do in order to set up this foundation, something that we can test so we can actually develop new knowledge? This is a tough one. I think most people answered, no, I couldn't answer this one. So I'll run through this. So plan creates the foundation for learning. And when we're talking about learning, we're learning new knowledge. And we're not looking for validation of existing or current knowledge. So that's the distinction. We're not trying to validate and prove ourselves right. We're trying to say, in fact, we're trying to give ourselves an opportunity to prove ourselves wrong, because that means we're learning something. If I already knew it, I didn't learn anything. So when we begin with, first of all, an idea or a theory, something to test. If we try this on a different shift, if we do this before they go to the dining room rather than after, if we put the sign up at wheelchair height level instead of at the standing level, whatever those kind of little things are, I can have a theory of something I can test. I have an idea. And then we create a simple plan to test our idea or our theory. And then finally, with our plan, we write down a prediction about the results that the test will produce. And it's only a prediction, first of all, if it's written down before you run the test, because if you write down what you thought was going to happen after, it's not a prediction. And the other thing that's important about this is it has to be falsifiable. What do we mean by falsifiable? Anybody know that word?
Yeah, I'm not sure. Is that similar to like the null hypothesis? If you're
Well, it means that you can prove it wrong. Meaning you have to state your prediction in a way that I can say, yeah, that was right or that was wrong after I get the results back.
yeah,
So just
I think it was,
go ahead. We're just looking for a way to say, I need to phrase my prediction in a way that someone else can say, yes, it happened, or no, it didn't happen.
Okay. Yep.
So I can prove it right, or I can prove it wrong. I can prove it falsifiable. So the 3 things that we need if we're going to set up learning, I have an idea to test, a way to test it, and a prediction about the results of the test. Those are the 3 essentials that we have in our plan phase. And this essential here, predicted result, is very critical. That's one of the things that has to happen for us to be able to study it and say we learned something or we didn't learn something. So in question 4, we asked, there are 2 things that happen during a successful do phase. I can describe them both. I'm surprised. So most people said, I don't know what this is. What might be the 2 things that we have to do? So we've already got our structure and plan, the foundation. We've got an idea we're testing. We've got a test plan. We have a prediction. What has to happen in do to make our Pdsa cycle be successful? the very first thing, what do you think we need to be doing and do? We want to be following the test plan. That's pretty simple. Now, I've been in organizations where we said the test didn't work, and yet we go back and we see that the plan actually wasn't followed. For instance, we changed the staffing mix in one shift, and what happened was, or at least that was the plan, to change the staffing mix. And then what happened was somebody called in sick, somebody got transferred, a new person showed up in the shift, so we had someone that was inexperienced. And then when we were studying the results, we forgot to ask, did we actually follow the test plan? Because that's the part that our prediction is based upon. So it's very important to follow the test plan in order to determine whether or not we learned something later. And finally, there's observations, both predicted and unpredicted, that are going to occur when you run your test. And here's a hint. If you don't have any unpredicted observations recorded, you're probably not recording sufficient observations. There's always something that's happening that you didn't predict. It's not in your written prediction. So it's important to document as much as you can about, here's what happened while we were testing our plan. Thoughts about this? How often do we pay attention to, did we follow our plan?
Yeah, I can see that happening a fair amount of the time, where, especially in healthcare, when there's so many, changing variables, like you mentioned, with people and shifts and staffing and what we wrote down that was going to happen doesn't actually get implemented as we originally designed it.
Exactly. So we have to be very cautious about when we start to evaluate, hey, did our test work? We should be asking, first of all, did we actually follow the plan? So that's why a successful do phase means we followed our test plan. The who, the what, the where, the when, the how many, those kind of things that we laid out in our test plan. We want to make sure that got followed.
Eric, I think
Go
it's
ahead.
important in that test plan piece that you're making sure that you have checkpoints. And what are you going to observe, like you said, during those checkpoints? And even if you didn't follow the plan, that becomes part of your observations. Why
Yes.
weren't you able to follow the plan? Because you predicted that you could. And I think that's the piece that we miss. All of our QA monitoring tools just say, did we do it or didn't we do it? Did we get the result we wanted or didn't we get the result? We don't build those. What are we looking for? What are we asking people if we're not getting the result that we expected, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that thing that you said about, we also predicted that we could do the plan, we could run this test. And if we don't follow it, that's an element of learning. That's a very insightful observation. So thank you for sharing that. In question number 5, I can state the key question that should be asked and answered in study. This is kind of obscure, and I don't know that we had one person out of our group say that they could answer it. Most of us said, I don't know what this answer is. The question we're trying to figure out is, now what do we know? So let's talk about what do we mean by this? Like, what's the now and what do we know at this point? So in study, the now is, it's after the plan and after the do. So that's where we're at. So we had a prediction, we had an idea, we had a test plan, we had a prediction, then we ran a test, we have some observations. So that's where we're at in study. So we have a theory or an idea that we're testing. We have a plan that we wanted to use to test the theory or idea. We had a prediction about the results of the test. And we have observations made during the test. So one of the first things we just talked about was, you know what, do we actually run the test or not? You know, if the test, if we didn't follow the test plan, that's something we can pay attention to. And like Vicky said, we could look at, well, why was it we didn't run the test? There might be something to learn there. Let's just say we did run the test. Now we have observations of things that we both expected to see and things that we did not expect to see. So we have our test, we have observations of things that happened that we thought would happen, and we have some things that happened that we didn't expect to happen. And then we also made predictions. Like, here's some things that happened that I predicted. There's also some things that happened that I did not predict, or things that I predicted did not happen. So there's those two distinctions. Things I predicted did not happen, or things happened that I did not predict. Those are all opportunities for us to learn something about our idea and our knowledge in that situation. So here's a question about this. Now, when can we say we've learned something? So here's two situations. The first situation is everything I predicted happened. So did I learn something in that situation? Or things I predicted did not happen, or things happened that I did not predict? In which situation is learning actually occurring?
I think you learn in both situations.
So why would you learn in the first situation?
Well, you learned that your prediction was correct, that you had something made you make that prediction, some knowledge base made you make that prediction, and you were right.
So if I'm right, have I learned anything, or have I just validated something?
Well, probably validated, but I like to learn
Yeah.
that I'm right all the time.
Yeah, we do. And that's one of the challenges when we run PDSA cycles, is that sometimes we think, oh, it's great because like what I predicted happened. Well, that's just confirmation of existing knowledge. So we don't develop any new knowledge when we predict something and it happened. But when we actually predict something and it doesn't happen, or things happen we did not predict, then either we have existing knowledge is disconfirmed, meaning I have to unlearn something, I have to learn something new, I have to change my assumptions. That's the situation we're trying to get to. And that's why we ask, is our prediction falsifiable? Can I actually make a prediction that could be proven wrong? Oftentimes people like to set up a test to validate what they know already. And so while it's perfectly human to want to do that, the situation is we don't really learn anything other than, we can pat ourselves on the back and say, good job, I do that. So what we're looking for is, now what do we know? Meaning, did I add to my knowledge, or am I where I started at the beginning? So what we're looking for is, I want to do some learning because then I can produce improvement.
Eric,
Question number, go ahead.
this is Doug.
Doug.
I sometimes in being wrong, although I don't like to admit I'm the W word sometimes, is that you find after you have to restudy things again, you wind up finding the unicorn that you were looking for to solve the problem as well.
Right. It's a challenge because it's nothing we like. It doesn't always feel good to be wrong. I think that's what you're pointing out. And sometimes there's like some unicorn or some gold there in being wrong. Like, wait a minute, I thought this was going to happen. Something else happened. And sometimes there's magic in that. I was working with a bank one time in Flint. We had a person, they wanted to change a pricing model, and one of the sales managers, you'd call them that, was adamantly opposed to. He says that pricing model will not work. We let that person be in charge of the test to test that. And it turned out that the pricing model that he was opposed to, but he actually said, I want to prove this wrong. His predictions were wrong. It turned out the new pricing model was correct. And he became the biggest champion for that new model for the bank. that there was, because he had already validated it for himself. It's like he had learned something there that he was adamantly opposed to, and thought, and yet, so he took this, I was wrong, and turned it into something really magical for the entire organization. So there's a version of a unicorn that showed up in a way that we didn't expect. So sometimes you want to have your naysayers be in charge of some of your tests, because they're out to prove it wrong, and yet when the evidence comes in, they might be your strongest backer then for here's the new way to do something. In item 6, there are 3 choices to be made during ACT that, and I can explain what is the same about each of these choices. So adopt, adapt, or abandon. So what do we mean by these choices? Can anybody explain what each choice means in the first place? What do we mean by adopt? What are we adopting?
I would say adopt is you're taking your new procedure or your new knowledge base and using that going forward.
Yeah, you've tested it. You said, oh, it worked in our test. Let's do it. Like across the entire facility, across all shifts, across all people, departments, whatever it is, we're adopting this. What do we mean by adapt?
You might have to change your, you learn some things from your study and you might have to change the process a little bit.
Yeah, there's
Maybe part of it worked, but another part still needs some tweaking.
Right. And like you said before, maybe I need to test it in another area just to make sure it has a positive impact over there, even though we know it works over here. Does it work over there, and does it not cause problems? Those kind of things. So either adapt means expand it a little bit, or test it over a longer period of time just to see, can we scale this in a way that's going to be workable for all of us? And then what about abandon?
It either made things worse and you're just going to start over, or
Yeah. My typical thought about abandon is we're never doing that again. It's one of those like, whoa, that's not a good way to go at all. But you have to test some things to find out. So when we look at these, we're actually making a prediction about something with each one of these. So that's the thing that's similar about each one of these, is we're making a prediction. So when I say that, what's the prediction we're making? If I say we're going to adopt this, what's the prediction we're making?
I think you're
It'll be
saying that,
successful.
yeah, that this change is going to be an improvement.
Yeah, for everybody, like, or wherever this new change is going to be implemented, that's it. Whether it be in our weekly leadership meetings or our monthly reviews or our rounds, whatever it is that we think this is going to be useful for, this is our prediction that it's going to work. Now, what about adapt? What's the prediction we're making here?
That it could work, but we might just have to tweak it for our own facility or tweak it a little bit.
Yeah, we think there's something to learn. So when we're adapting something, we're making a prediction that, you know what, this seems workable, but we think there's more to learn about this. And then finally, when we say in ACT, we're going to abandon this, what's the prediction we're making? It's funny to think of it as a prediction when we say we're abandoning something.
Just the change that we made has not resulted in an improvement.
Yeah, and our prediction is it never will, because we're not going to do this anymore. So we're saying there's no way that what we're tried here is going to work for us, and we're going to give it up. We're not going to follow that path or thought process anymore. All right, so here's another one that might be new for people. Although, I got a lot of people that said, yes, I could explain this. Fuzzy words make it difficult to evaluate the results of a Pdsa cycle. I can name at least 3 that should not be used. Let's talk about this a little bit. So fuzzy words fail one or all of the rules of measurability, meaning anyone can see it, anyone can count it, anyone can agree that it occurred. So those are some basics of, if it's it's tangible. It's got hard edges to it. Everybody can say, yeah, that's it. There's no, like on ordinal scales, like more or less, sometimes the way people answer those things is like, maybe they're overlapping in their responses. So there's a lot of things that fuzzy words cause us problems with, and they might fail one or more of these rules. So here's some fuzzy words examples. And we, in the academy, we call them off limits words. So a fuzzy word might be, we might use fewer when we say fewer falls, rather than the number of falls per 100 resident days is much more clear and measurable. Better mobility instead of increased gait distance measured in feet. Reduced use rather than number of new antipsychotic starts per month. Improved hydration rather than fluid intake in milliliters per day. Or more regular bowel patterns rather than completed opportunities increased from 52 per 100 to 88 per 100. So we want to get away from things that are really more challenging for us to evaluate. When you say fewer, better, reduced, those are all fuzzy. We want something that's much more tangible and specific, going, yeah, that happened or that didn't happen. And that makes our predictions fit much better in the falsifiable category. So, and we shun the use of fuzzy words or off limits words for all these different reasons, but there's a couple that are particularly useful around Pdsa cycles. They help us avoid ambiguity, and they distinguish real progress from perceived progress. So when we say fuzzy words make it difficult to evaluate the results of a Pdsa cycle, fewer, better, reduced, improved, more, those are all examples of fuzzy words. Any thoughts? Do you run across these fuzzy words in things that people are using in their Pdsa cycles? Have you used them yourselves? Do you have any tests you're running right now where you're saying, what are we evaluating? Is a fuzzy word or two in your description of what you're evaluating or trying to produce?
Yeah, I think you definitely see those words. If it's with qualifiers, then that put the specificity behind, you want to improve something, and then here's what an improvement would look like. Then you're kind of self-correcting that the use of that term by putting in those very distinct parameters.
Yeah, so when we say fewer, and then we say this is what we mean by fewer, that helps clarify. If all we do is we say fewer, then it starts to get ambiguous because we don't know necessarily where we started or where we intend to end up. Like what's improvement look like is we might have a goal that, you know what, that's closer, but that's not where we want to get to. More or better, those kind of things. So yeah, when we have those qualifiers, that helps a lot. So let's talk about this. This is interesting because we had a lot of people say yes to this one, and I'm pleased to see that. So I can explain how using Pdsa cycles improves motivation and reduces stress. I'd like to hear your thoughts before I share what I was thinking about this. So when you think Pdsa helps reduce stress and improve motivation, what are your thoughts on this?
I think if you're doing the cycle how it's intended and you're asking people in the study process of how things are going and getting their input, it really helps improve their motivation to look at those things and be a part of the solution.
Yeah, when you feel like you're a part of the solution and you feel like it's honestly a part of the solution, it's not just, trying to make people feel good, but we actually use the input. That's an important part of helping people feel motivated about the work they're doing in the improvement effort. Other thoughts about why using the Pdsa cycle might improve motivation and reduce stress?
It reduces stress because it defines like you have a clear role and you know exactly what to do. You're not overwhelmed. You know, it's been proven that this works, so you're taking that information and you're able to use it, and
Oh, yeah.
your goal is clear and your action is clear.
Yeah. Yeah, those are big stress reducers when you kind of have some certainty, right? Lack of certainty can increase stress. I think I hear you saying that. Is that right?
Yes.
I got it. So let me share a couple things about this, and I'll explain what I'm thinking when using Pdsa cycles helps improve motivation and reduce stress. And this is a 3-part definition of stress from John Medina. He wrote Brain Rules, 12 Principles for Surviving and Thriving at Work, Home, and School. And you may have a different definition of stress, but this one seems to be very useful. He says, first of all 3 are happening simultaneously. So I'll talk about the 3 parts, and remember, as we go through these, all 3 have to be present at the same time for us to have a definition or an operational definition of stress. The first is there's an aroused physiological response to the stress, and it's measurable by an outside party. Now, what are some of the things that we could measure in response to when people have stress responses? What are things that are physiological responses?
Tense
Say
body.
again?
They're tense. Their body is tense.
Oh, yeah. So there's the muscular tension that we could somehow measure or track. What else?
You kind of can hear it in their voice.
Yeah, so so that's another version of tension, right? The vocal cords, you tense up, their voice might get higher, or they might speak more rapidly. What other physiological symptoms might we have of stress?
Are you talking things that you can see or
Things that could be seen or measured.
oh, okay, then like increased blood pressure, increased pulse,
Yep. Heart
increased
rate,
respirations, yep.
respiration, yep. Blood pressure, perspiration. So there's a variety of physiological factors that you could say are present. So somehow there's an aroused physiological response. So that's one part. Part 2 is the stressor is seen as aversive, meaning if you had the ability to turn it down, I want to crank that down, or I want to leave, you would. So that's from the perspective of the person experiencing the stress. They see it as aversive. They want it to stop or be reduced. And then the third part, remember, all 3 have to be present. You have to feel not in control of the stressor. So a lack of control is a key thing. And I think we heard that earlier about have some influence or control in a situation reduces stress. So that's a 3-part definition of stress that I think is very useful. And we can combine that with this definition of motivation came from Mary Jenkins. She worked with W. Edwards Deming when he was leading improvement activity at General Motors, and she was the chief HR executive for one of GM's divisions, powertrain division. She wrote a book about performance appraisals, why they fail and what to do instead. She did a lot of work around motivation, and she said there's 3 factors that contribute to intrinsic motivation: the ability to collaborate with other people, having a challenge in the Goldilocks zone, not too challenging, but not too easy, but having a challenge. And then having choice, being able to choose some of the things that you're working on or who you're working with. And all 3 of those together are significant indicators of the presence or the factors that contribute to intrinsic motivation. So given what we've just talked about stress and motivation, what are your thoughts about how Pdsa cycles might improve motivation and reduce stress? What are things we could say about that?
as we're testing a process, we're designing it based on our theory of how it's going to hopefully meet a goal or make an improvement, and we're in control of that process. So I think that helps reducing stress in that, to the extent possible, we're designing this to, and it's within our control to put that plan into effect and see how it's going to turn out.
Yeah. Yeah, control about how things turn out makes a big difference for a team that's trying to work on improvement activities. I worked in an organization where we had repeated improvement efforts going on. And one of the rules we gave to the executives in the organization was the team is proving what they're doing, and they're testing it in a way that we all agree they're following the appropriate test methods and developing the data. If they come up with a change that they recommend for the organization, we will implement it. And so there was something not only about we had some control, but we also had some really powerful influence on, it's not just we're making a recommendation based on our test, we're actually implementing something, like we're making a difference here. So having that kind of control can be very powerful. What other ways do Pdsa cycles help improve motivation or reduce stress? Or could they? I'm not saying everyone does, but what might they do?
They might give confidence.
Compliments, he said?
Confidence.
Confidence, yes. Yeah, so there's confidence around, are you thinking about confidence about your ability to actually do something or perform something or make a difference?
Yes. Being able to do it and making a difference by doing it the correct way.
Yeah, that's huge. And what that's, I don't mention it here in this session, but Pdsa cycles and improvement efforts are really good ways to both develop and evaluate leadership skills in people. If you put them in charge of a small test, it's not costly to the organization if that doesn't work too well, that person's leadership capabilities, but it also gives people a confidence in, you give them an opportunity to lead something, and it gives them confidence, not only I can do this thing, this technical thing we're working on, but I also have some skills on putting together a team, working in collaboration with others, communicating, reporting. There's a variety of ways that you can use Pdsa cycles to both develop and evaluate leadership skills. There's also the element, almost everybody's Pdsa cycles, you're working with other people, correct?
Right.
Yeah, so there's an element of collaboration there that we typically like working with others. I mean, there are people that, anyways, I won't go there, but a lot of times we have this fun of, hey, it's really fun to work in a group, and especially accomplish something together as a group. So that element of challenge and collaboration together is an element that can also contribute to improving motivation. All right, moving on. So in number 9, I can explain the 2 changes that demonstrate knowledge for improvement has been gained. This one's almost too obvious, and it might have been too simple for a response. But the first one is simply, we've started new actions that produce desired or predicted outcomes. That's one obvious way I can tell that we're learning. The other is the flip side of that. We've stopped actions that are causing undesirable or unpredicted outcomes. So if we're looking at, hey, are we actually, if we go back to this, changes that demonstrate knowledge for improvement has been gained, we can ask ourselves, do we have at least one of these 2 categories of actions that we can look to and say, you know what? Yep, we've learned something here, because we either started doing stuff that's worked or we stopped doing stuff that isn't working. And then finally, I don't know, I've seen this in some of the literature that you guys have access to, but I don't know if you use as part of the structure the 3 questions from the model for improvement. Anybody want to share about that? Have you seen these before, or are these new?
Well, that's from IHI, what you're showing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the people from IHI developed it. They borrowed it from the Associates for Process Improvement.
Mhm.
And a couple of founders of IHI were part of that consulting group. I learned my PDSA work and a lot of my quality improvement work from API, from the founders of those organizations. And so I love these questions. I mean, I think they're fundamental for us. And it's important sometimes we get mixed up in, well, where do our PDSA ideas come from? So your 3 basic questions are the high level overall project questions, and your PDSA cycle questions are something different. So in general, so the question number 1 is, what are we trying to accomplish? That's your end goal. And to answer this question correctly, you don't have methods embedded in your answer, because you don't want to say, for instance, I'm going to drive to Chicago when I want to go from Detroit to Chicago. You don't want to say, well, let's drive there, because you might want to have the option of flying, taking the plane, or taking the train, those kind of things. You don't want to limit your method of accomplishing your goal by embedding a method in your description of the goal. And it also aligns everybody around the objective. So the first thing is just like, where do we want to go? What do we want to get to? What's the end state look like? This is a real critical question. Number 2 is, how will we know a change is an improvement? And this really needs to be defined well in advance of any kind of changes that you're making, because it's real easy to retrofit what's happening to, oh yeah, that's what we wanted, and really may not have been the case. So you define your measures, metrics, or milestones in advance. And there's 2 parts to this. It's either it can describe progress, it can measure progress, or it can define the achievement of the desired goal. So either way, progress towards or achievement of your goal. And then finally, what moves can we test? Now, other documentation will say what changes can we make. The only way you make improvement in the world is to move something. And we can talk about the different things that get moved, but something has to move for an improvement to occur. So what moves can we test that will result in improvement? And if you use that distinction when you're thinking about designing your PDSA cycles, you'll have much more tangible tests and test plans when you're saying, I'm testing this move or that move. And it could be a policy move, could be an approval authority move. So it doesn't have to be something necessarily physical, like I'm going to change the distance from the bed to the bathroom kind of moves, but that's also a move kind of thing. So there's a variety of different moves that you could make that are things that you could test that you think will result in improvement. So what moves can we test? And that's where you design your specific moves to be tested. So one of the best ways to come up with good ideas is to use the rule of 7. Has anybody heard of this? The rule of 7 for generating ideas? Probably not. It's simply everybody on the team comes up with 7 different ideas that will produce improvement in the thing that you're trying to accomplish. Now, you're better off if you've set some criteria for this is how we're going to evaluate our ideas before you come up with your list of 7 each. But basically you're saying, we're each going to have 7 different ideas. Why would 7 ideas be an effective way of developing good improvement ideas?
Well, I
What
think at
happened?
least with 7, it gives you a certain variety to react to, and maybe if you get everybody's ideas out there, then you might have something where you might do like a a multi-vote or something for people
Yep.
to pick what comes to the top is really the top idea, the first change to test first.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing that's really obvious, and I've studied this in some of the situations where we use 7 ideas each, is almost everybody's idea 5, 6, and 7 are better ideas than their ideas 1, 2, and 3. Why would that be, do you think? Why do you get better, more creative ideas with your 5th, 6th, and 7th idea than you do your 1st, 2nd, or 3rd?
You're thinking deeper and
Yeah.
reaching deeper.
Yeah, because the first 3 are right off the top of your head. Things we've tried before. It's iterations of something that's already been tried. When you get to 5, 6, and 7, you have to start to be creative. And that's where the magic of the 7 ideas comes through. So here's how this works in general. What you get is you've got what moves can we test? And each person on the team generates 7 ideas. And then you've got some criteria, method of selecting your ideas to test. And so on a small scale, you create small scale tests for the ones that you selected. And then you've got a learning path to improvement. And some ideas work out, some don't. Some get merged, and eventually you end up with, oh, this looks like we're producing improvement eventually. Now, one of the things that the API folks taught me early on was it's at least 4 to 5 Pdsa cycles before real improvement begins. So you shouldn't expect after the 1st or 2nd Pdsa cycles that magic happens and we're off on our way to like everything's wonderful and better. It's going to take a little bit. So when we ask the question, from which of the 3 questions do we get our Pdsa ideas? It's question number 3. What moves can we test that will result in improvement? So that's the source. All right. So any thoughts or comments about all these things that we've talked about so far? All right, now we have a post-session quiz. So remember, we're working and living in a real world and not a classroom. So what does that mean? Well, when you work on Pdsa cycles, you have access to all of your resources. Your previous knowledge, notes, research, devices, tools, applications, standard work, and your coworkers. So the same is true for our post-session quiz. So as you decide how to answer, be sure to use all of your resources. Your notes, your handout, your teammates, anything you have available you can use as a resource. This isn't, I'm evaluating your own work. This is like, how do I put it all together to provide an answer? Now, our format for this poll is going to be different. There's actually 3 versions of answer that we have. The A answer is, if you could explain it now when called upon, you say, yes, I could do that. B is, I answered yes originally, but now I have a new yes. So that would be B. And then C is still no. Now, given that you have all these resources available to you, I would think we'd be hard pressed to have any no's show up, but that's also a possibility. So I'm going to issue the next poll. Let's see. How can I do this? I'm going to start launch the after Pdsa one. All right. Are people seeing this now?
Yes.
Okay, good. So it says there's 17 people participating. So again, I'll just walk through the questions and give you a chance to think about them as we ask them. So the same questions, I can explain the relationship between change and improvement. Yes, I have a new yes, or it's still no. And if you want to talk to me about if you've got a no and you want to change, you want to turn it to a yes, speak up. Number 2, I can explain the primary purpose of the Pdsa cycle. yes, new yes, or no. I can list the 3 elements of a successful plan phase. Yes, new yes, or no. There are 2 things that happen in a successful do phase. I can describe them both. I can state the key question that should be asked and answered in study. There are 3 choices to make an act in the act phase of PDSA. I can explain what is the same about each of these choices. Fuzzy words make it difficult to evaluate the results of a PDSA cycle. I can name at least 3 that should not be used. I can explain how using PDSA cycles improves motivation and reduces stress. I can explain 2 changes that demonstrate knowledge for improvement has been gained. And when we use the 3 questions from the model for improvement, I can explain which question is the source for PDSA tests. Okay. I see people are still working on their answers. So as we're wrapping up, anybody want to share anything about what they heard today that they found useful or perhaps new to your PDSA work, something that might be beneficial for you? I see a lot of new yeses, so it looks like people picked up a few new things today. So maybe I'll phrase it differently. So next time you run or design or work in your PDSA cycle, what's something that you might bring to it that you've heard today?
Well, I think it's helpful, Eric, to have, because we've been talking PDSA and within this group for a really long time. But
Mhm.
this kind of, I think, information kind of takes us back a little bit to the beginning and gives you more of a look behind the curtains of where all this came from. So it's not just, because everybody out there will go, yeah, we use PDSA all the time. But I think this will help us really kind of refine how we're using it by really having more kind of background knowledge behind the process.
That's good. Yeah, sometimes understanding why you're doing something really makes it easier to do it more effectively, instead of just filling out a form and following the steps and kind of doing it by rote. There's a question: will this recording be available to share with our team? Yes, I'll be. Oh, Renee, you answered it. Yep, we'll be sharing that shortly.
And I did put the IHI link in the chat just for people if you've never taken a look at that website, Institute for Healthcare Improvement, and all the tools and information that they have. It's very worthwhile to take a peek.
It's one of the best. When Ron Moen was alive, he was one of the advisors to their improvement collaboratives. They would have collaboratives between hospitals that would develop new methods of doing things across healthcare in general. And they used Pdsa cycles along with some other work that was very beneficial and helped advance the knowledge tremendously. And the more you can apply the Pdsa cycle and then share with each other and then ramp up your level of knowledge, that's very beneficial to do. So when we get together in person, that'll be a helpful thing for us to do, is share, here's what we learned by applying improvement methods. And IHI is one of the best organizations to follow as far as following improvement methods. So thanks for sharing that, Renee. I really appreciate that. It's a really useful link to go to. All right, I don't have anything else for you today. I want to thank you again for your participation. Thank you so much for joining in. I'm going to close the poll out so I make sure I don't lose this if I close the session. I'm going to end the poll. One more. Yeah, thanks everyone. I appreciate you joining us today. And Renee, I'll be sending you the video here shortly.
Okay, that's perfect. And I will be sending it out. So Eric, do you have the emails for the people that registered for this or that are here, or?
If you say yes to the calendar invitation, I have your email. If there's some other way you've joined us that you didn't say yes to the calendar invitation, I don't know if I have everybody's email.
Yeah,
then.
so what I will do is I will send this out to your director of nursing and your administrator. And if they don't get it to you, please feel free to email me directly. And once I have it from Eric, I will get it out to anyone who still has not gotten it. Another way you can get it from me directly.
Okay, and I just have one more thing. I'm very willing to interact or work with anybody who wants to ask questions about their own Pdsa work. If you feel stuck in a particular approach, or you have a question about, hey, what do we do next? Or is there a way of looking at this differently that might help us? Please get in touch. My email and phone number are on the screen. I'm very willing to support anybody who's doing work in their Pdsa if they make a request. All right, thanks everybody. Have a good day.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Eric.
joining
All
us.
right.
Thank you.
You too. All righty. Bye-bye.
Bye now.